Sue Richardson.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for talking to us today.
Happy
this
to.
piece of work, am I right in thinking it's called Burnt Breakfast?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell us a bit about it? Was it made in 1975?
Yes, it was. It was made as part of the Postal Art Event.
What is that? What was that?
Well, it started because my friend Monica and I went to London to a women's art conference, one of the first ones, I think. And Kate Walker stood up at this conference at one point and said, aren't there any other women artists here who work from home and who don't have studios, who just work from home? Yeah. Mothers. And Monica and I stood up and said, yes, we are. That's what we do. We work on the kitchen table or when we've got a few minutes. And we got together with Kate. Kate was already thinking about using this idea of postal art. She had a friend who'd moved to the Isle of Wight and she wanted to start a communication with artworks with her friend. So we decided to start a whole event and we just sent works through the post to anyone that we wanted to, really. Other women who were at home, mainly young mums, who were restricted after having had maybe quite a free life at college or at university. Suddenly, once they were married and they got children, they were mums and wives and they weren't themselves quite anymore. So it was about that. It was about reclaiming yourself. Sometimes it would be a postcard that went through the post. Sometimes, as in this case, it ended up being Burnt Breakfast. But the first thing I sent was a crochet that said me. It's not here today. It just said Emmy.
Yeah.
In the colours that I like, you know, like a little doily, and I sent it through the post. I think to Kate, but I can't really remember. Well, what happened was that it took off, and there were probably quite a lot of us involved, maybe 30 women, I'm not really sure of the number. It was anonymous. We decided it would be great to exhibit some of these things, but we had to ask people if they wanted to do that. And quite a lot of women didn't want to do that. Quite a lot of them weren't artists, and it was a private thing. But those of us who did got together and decided we would exhibit it, and we did exhibit initially in Birmingham and then eventually at the ICA. And it went from just showing a few things like this to creating environments that were rather like the home. So having a mock-up of a kitchen, of a bedroom, and so on, where we displayed the works which were still anonymous.
And as you mentioned, the ICA, Lucy Lippard curated the show. Is that
no,
right? It was called Issues? Or?
I think we curated it ourselves. We worked with, I'm pretty sure it was someone who used to work at West Midlands Arts who already knew us, who invited us to show there. And it was a bit of a risk, but he was coming to the end of his tenure and he thought he'd take a chance. Because, of course, it was advertised, you know, it was just women's tat, you know? Right. Or craft work. It wasn't seen as art. Yes. Why was it there? Yes. What you're talking about was something that Monica and Kate and I worked on afterwards called Phoenix, which was a travelling installation where we went to galleries who would have us for a week, let us work there because we hadn't got places to work at home. We would build an installation and then we would take it back home again and it would come out again. And that was what Lucy Lippard picked for Issues. It was part of this project called Phoenix. Right. And we put it into her Issues show. Right. So.
Extraordinary. And so is this exhibition here now in some ways a revisiting of
it is those, for me, yes.
Those times of Lippard's show or of the postal events?
Well, I think it's looking back at, although these things possibly don't look very uncommon now, in that there's a craft revival, a craftivist revival, but 40 years ago, no one was doing this, you know, and also, because I'd been a graphic designer, the whole point for me was to get across some sort of message, and because I knew that the message wasn't particularly nice always, you know, I needed to make it humorous, colourful, nice to look at, so people would come and look at it before anything else, before they'd see it was burned or it had got shit on it, or it had got, you know, it got a baby's face inside it. I mean, the packed lunch is a good example of that. It's all the other things you're thinking about when you've got to make a meal. Never mind actually do any artwork, you know, so I had to incorporate all of those things into this. So it was like a crochet in my life, really. And I haven't done it since then. I stopped with the larger pieces of work around about 83, mainly because I couldn't afford to do it anymore and we couldn't get work. We were on a list of people who you don't give work to, you know, most of the male art critics and the men who ran courses in colleges were not interested in hiring us and didn't like the work.
Well,
So I ended up doing
and
something totally different.
But they weren't interested in hiring you as teachers?
No,
or
that's right, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you apply for
We
work
applied for loads of work as visiting
When
lecturers.
you say we,
Monica and I, particularly, because we were both in Birmingham.
right.
And Kate had had bits of work. Similarly, we were all looking for just ways of surviving, really.
Yes.
So eventually, I think for me, I got the opportunity to do something different. So that's what I did. And I joined a band. I knew 2 songwriters, and they wanted someone to join the band, so I did that.
Right.
And I converted a washboard into my particular instrument because, it was to do with women's lives. But I was going to make it into a really good percussion instrument, which I did. So I'm kind of... the guy who runs the band says I'm the world's best washboard player. I'm sure I'm not, but, I still do that. In between, I've done all sorts of other work. This is from the 1980s until now. But in the last 4 or 5 years, as the band has reformed again because we've still got bands from the past.
Yes.
So I'm doing that again. And there's been renewed interest from PhD students in coming to maybe find slides of work at the slide library at Goldsmiths through Althea Greenham.
Yes.
And then she would get in touch with me and say, would you talk to a PhD student? She's interested in researching your work. So I see them, I help them with their research, and they've helped with the resurgence of the importance of this work. I do feel that at the time it was quite important, and it got lost a bit.
And so have you made a new piece of work for this exhibition?
Yeah, I've made a few new pieces, but they're just starting again, really. I mean, that's a new one.
Right.
And these are new. These on the back wall here.
Right.
Which are, I suppose, they're about expressing, aren't they? They're about being a mum.
Yes.
The one at the bottom, man's hands.
Right.
A little bit more about what's been happening in the press lately.
I was going to say, how does it relate to the Me Too, Never Again? And
it slightly relates, but then I'm a grandma now. It's not quite the same as being a young mum where I was very, very angry about everything. I mean, I'm still angry about things, but I've still to explore that really and to see whether I want to carry on producing that kind of work. Yeah. I mean, I carried on doing it through the band, if you like, but in a different way. Yeah. In that when I started, there was certainly no women playing percussion in bands, There are now. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.